Welcome back to the Swiss campaign abridged, where last time things were going pretty well for a while, but then the Comintern attacked, or actually we attacked the Comintern, and by we I mean Germany. We ended up at war in all directions for a while, completely under siege. Luckily our allies were able to relieve us, and we even helped out a little bit ourselves in a miraculous twist. And then, well, our allies just went on to win everything and take the enemy out of our theatre entirely. There's still some war going on somewhere else, but it seems we have the advantage. And we're actually now skipping to like 3 years or 2 years after the end of the last part, because nothing at all happened. The war's somewhere else, it's not here in Switzerland. There's no gameplay left to be had, and that's slightly below the threshold of minimal gameplay that we're going for here. So we need to stir up some trouble, at the very least to get some of our people killed. We've now got so much fascism, I'm sure they're dying to die for the motherland and all that. Also in this mod, the music keeps turning off, so there's me turning it back on. Inconvenient. Anyway. First I decided to leave the Central Powers, thinking one way to get back into the war and get back into the action is to join the other faction. We're just going to straight up switch sides. You're actually not allowed to do this in the base game or in the normal game, so we are cheating to achieve this diplomatic switcheroo. It was surprisingly difficult. Every time I click on the Netherlands, which is up here now, it selects China, which doesn't make things any easier. So I started gradually getting out of my war with the Netherlandish Illuminati faction, trying to get to the point when I can join it. I think I didn't need to do this. I think I could have just used the AI forced diplomacy thing to immediately switch sides and be pulled out of one war and then put back in on the other side. Something, something, something. Here we are, now as a member of the Netherlandish faction, and I can join their wars right here to be on the other side. So let's see what happens in this new scenario. We are now traitors to the Central Powers after all this time. We helped them out quite a bit, but perhaps they didn't give us the appreciation we wanted or something. Or maybe it was simply the will of the Toblerones whispering in our ears. Now we're at war with all of the territory around us, and we'll soon be at war with lots of the world as well, because the Central Powers were actually winning that war quite well. We're now back safely on the losing side, or at least the locally losing side. The question was, would they actually do anything with this war, because they can surround us like this and put us under siege? But they didn't actually attack us, and I was looking for them to at least try and bring us down. That brings us to the next clip of me cheating. Here, I'm cheating to get all of the decryption and encryption technologies. That's because somebody on Reddit or something suggested that if you get these, the AI might not be able to see what you have, and then will be more interested in attacking you because it doesn't know how defended your territory is. So the idea was that this would somehow cause the enemy to start an offensive. Well, it didn't. I don't even really know what those techs do. We end up in this situation. We're occasionally being attacked by planes, but for the most part, we're just sitting here and the enemy have us under siege. Really, it's very similar to the no gameplay we had before, so we need more steps to force some stuff to happen. Therefore, here in 1939, I found some more cheats. Now I have a cheat that allows me to create new factions effectively by forcing civil wars on other countries, and I can force them to be fascist as well. So there's now a massive fascist uprising in the German Empire. The idea now is that I'm going to end the war, but I'm going to end it not with either of the original sides winning. I'm going to create a new side that will win whatever war we're in now, World War I Part 7 or something. So here's my new faction. We're going to start Hail God Emperor Devin, and we're going to start making new fascist uprisings all over the world and force them to be allied to each other by using this faction. So now I just need to go around making all of the new fascist factions. The only limitation is that each country has a 3-letter code that you need to know in order to do cheats on them. Sometimes it's obvious, like BRA for Brazil, but in other cases it's not obvious. There is actually a way to look it up by making a tooltip appear that shows you what it is, which I later found out somewhere. So we're just going to make all of these factions. You might think, by the way, if I'm just going to make a ton of factions and force them to win the war, isn't that just too much cheating? That doesn't really do anything. We can win the campaign by just cheating our way to victory. Well, we could do that, However, my goal here isn't to win the campaign by any means. We're going to make a big fascist faction for our own sinister purposes a bit later, which we'll get to. After a while, the whole world is totally messed up. We've actually created a world war. What do you know? We've caused so many countries to have rebellions. There's now fighting all over the place, and the game is constantly harassing me to get involved in all of the new wars that have started, because each rebellion is its own war. So this set of wars that we're in here is just the beginning. There are millions of actual wars going on. So we'll let them stew. The thing is, we need these wars to all be won by the rebelling faction, and that's not guaranteed to happen, of course. That means we need to intervene if we can and try to get this world war to go our way. But yes, notable that at last the fighting is all over the place, so maybe this is the first world war, really. Now, as an aside, Soviet Russia is back. The old Second Russian Empire has renamed itself Soviet Russia. I noticed I could ask them to join my faction, and it actually says that they have, although they haven't. I think it's because I have the AI accept thing. They're allowed to accept deals with other factions, but it doesn't do anything. So that's a shame. Would have been nice to just convert everyone into my faction right now. That would have sped up the process. Unfortunately, we're doing this the slow way, but not necessarily the hard way, because we are cheating. We've got a decent amount of the world already, but plenty of Netherlandish Illuminati territory still to bring down. Now, to help out with this process, we need to get rid of a few enemy armies. And I noticed something in the cheat list which allows you to remove the conditions for nuking places. So that means it's nukes time already. This tends to happen in any OFID Hearts of Iron campaign. I eventually just start nuking absolutely everybody. And now it's going to happen a little bit earlier than normal because we don't even need the nukes. We can just blow up provinces at our leisure. The idea being that our allies might then push forwards and win the war. This isn't actually a particularly efficient way of doing things here, as we'll see in a second, but it is particularly flashy. We delete half of these armies on these tiles, maybe now our allies will win. It's also going to get rid of some of those entrenchments that are probably giving the enemy a defender's advantage. Now just the tedious process of going around all the tiles with enemies on them and clicking the nuke button. We need some sort of nuke painter tool where you just designate huge areas to be nuked at once. I guess the game didn't expect you to be doing that, but still, I think they should have. There's the news getting angry that somebody is nuclear bombing the planet. In this case, in the lore, I suppose it's just the aliens. They've given us control of their orbital defense platform, and we are just shooting down from orbit to help out this glorious fascist revolution, which I presume the aliens are on board with, probably being fascist themselves, given that they're supporting us. This goes on for a while before I realise there's another cheat in the list that will make my job way easier. There's a cheat called delete all units, and that's probably what we want for this situation. You still need to know something's country code to do it. Luckily we can use the tooltips to work that out. And then you just say delete all units. They actually don't appear to be deleted at first because they get deleted in future frames. But now I can go around, identify the codes of all the enemy factions and delete their stuff. This still won't immediately solve our issues because our allies have to go forwards and actually get the enemy to capitulate, and they will re-recruit and redeploy and things. And our allies seem to be like in disbelief that the enemy forces are gone because they don't advance very hard once the front line's completely empty. Well, we'll just go around and now use our additional alien powers on top of the orbital bombardment. We've just got the straight up abduction rays. We can make people mysteriously disappear, thus freeing up the front lines. Here's the British Raj, one of the factions I've played as before in Hearts of Iron 4. Need to get rid of them post-haste. It's actually not the Raj mostly defending the Raj, it's Nepal for some reason, who have become the local military powerhouse. Maybe all of the Raj forces already went over to join the fascist India faction. Well, we can delete Nepal as well. Nobody can get away with it as long as you have a code that works, which I think most of them did, but not all of them. Something to do with this mod using a few codes that are actually used by other factions in the base game, and it messes something up. Well, we got most of them. And here, we're doing another thing to help out our faction. I realize I can use the AI Force Accept cheat to make everybody who's not in a faction already join my faction just to stack things up. The thing is, the Force Accept cheat means this list you can scroll through to find factions who could join your faction also goes through the guys already in your faction because you're allowed to ask them to join again. Well, long story short, now more of the world is in the Hail God Emperor Devin faction, the official fascist overlord faction. We've still only got like half the world though. There are more people to take down. It's just a matter of time because I have to wait for my allies to actually do it. Once it's all happened, something very special takes place, something I've been waiting for a long time in this campaign. We actually go into a peace conference. That means the war, the thing that started way back when, is finally over. This is the first peace conference we've gotten to. I don't know if the other wars didn't get a conference because they were white pieces or something, but at last it's our chance to make some claims in the aftermath of a war. Or is it? We have like no points whatsoever, so everybody else has already made their claims in the peace treaty. We actually can't even do anything. That's because, well, it feels like we were helping in the war. Our feat of killing like 5 million enemy troops or whatever it was in the end is overwhelmed by the fact that something like the German Empire probably got like 70 million kills. They just also suffered terribly, so their ratio looks bad, but that's not what we're being judged on in this war contest. So we actually technically did terribly, and it's everyone else who's going to be changing the map up. So let's take a look at the nightmare realm that everyone else is creating for us. Well, it's not so bad for us because somebody decided we should have a fair bit of territory. I think this isn't quite what it looks like. That's actually occupied territory from another war that wasn't covered by that peace conference. It's got very confusing because everybody in the war is also in other wars. The peace conferences don't really make any difference because they're giving away territory they don't have due to occupation. Something, something, something. The world continues to be a nightmare, but lots of Hail God Emperor Devin territory is on the board, so that's looking pretty good. And the massive block of Netherlandish territory is mostly the low-strength African factions that aren't going to do that much. Eventually somebody might bother to invade them and change that up. It might have felt like that peace conference was a milestone of sorts, but it totally wasn't because we're just back to doing the same thing as before. The world isn't conquered, it's a bit more conquered from someone else's perspective or something. Apparently there was peace, the world war carries on all the same because we've got more world to take. And we're gaining more and more territory through occupation and taking full advantage of this because we now have loads of extra factories and loads of trade access. We're going to build things rapidly and we're going to stockpile a whole bunch of fuel, which I'm going to need for a bit later when we may not have access to said trade network. Here we are after some time. I'm simply watching the glorious red front line push across the world as our everlasting empire of fascist brothers calls upon the power of the alien abduction rays and such to eliminate all opposition, and soon looks like Africa's in trouble. We've got to get Northern Asia here as well, where the Netherlandish Illuminati is still holding out in the wastes. Ages later, we're in this situation. We've got pretty much the whole planet. A few bits are still left to be taken, but in the process of taking them, we finally get enough capitulation points. The game freezes, and as we've said before, that means something big is about to happen. In this case, it's the peace conference. Another peace conference where we can't have any say by the looks of things. We actually have a few points this time, despite not participating at all in this war. Not sure how it works. Maybe the game is acknowledging my role as the communicator, the beacon through which the aliens speak to us and influence the world. Well, here's the world after that peace treaty. This time it's for real. We're at peace. The war is over. And what a glorious war it was. The entire world is now covered in fascist versions of everything all over the place. Africa's been recolonized by the new factions. Most of the world map's kind of the same as it was before with a few alterations. It's mainly just the factions that have switched over. Britain is gone. It was all just a dream in the end anyway. So what we can do now is first admire the Hail God Emperor Devin message emblazoned across the planet, and note, by the way, that New Groot Nederland was never defeated. They still exist somehow in the form of Ukraine, so maybe the Illuminati's gathered there to plan their comeback. But for now, we're just going to ignore them. All I wanted was for one faction to control the vast majority of the world, and we've got that now. Time for the next stage of the plan. I noted, by the way, that some other factions have the same portrait as my faction leader. Makes me think that maybe this face is just the alien's ambassador's form on Earth, the only form he can shapeshift into, and he's currently controlling all of the different nations in the background. Well, there's a lot of lore we can imagine. Here was the first time I discovered this tab by clicking on it by accident. Never a fan of tabs in Paradox games, always tripping over those things. Well, there was another one. Didn't look at it too much. What I'm actually trying to do here is to now get out of this massive faction we've created so that I can declare war on that faction and achieve my lifelong dream of being at war with the entire planet. In order to achieve that, we have to do some shenanigans. That's why I've used a cheat to switch to be playing as the German Reich now. That's because Switzerland, as the head of the God Emperor Devin faction, can't either leave the faction or make somebody else the head of the faction, just more diplomatic options that simply aren't in the game. So we have to cheat to try and achieve this. That's why I switched to Germany, to try and ask to become the leader of the faction. Well, I can't do that. All I can do is leave. I can do the reverse of what I need to do here, and that's a shame. So actually starting a war where it's the entire world united into one faction against Switzerland, which is my goal, is going to be harder than expected. So we now bring ourselves to an XML editor looking at my save file. This is what it came down to, skipping over the annoying process of making these save files editable in this format. What we've got here is a list of the nations in my faction. All I needed to do is put somebody else at the top of the list, because that's how it determines who the leader is. So, by doing that switcheroo, when I load back into the game, Germany is now the leader of the faction. That means I'm allowed to ask to leave, and there we go. We've finally created a world where everybody is allied together, or almost everybody, and I can declare war on that alliance. First, we'll start forging some war goals to allow us to have that declaration available, and then we'll do it. So that's going to be what happens in part 7 of this campaign, the final test. The fascists have all emerged, but there can be only one master race, and the aliens have prepared the battleground for this arena battle, where Switzerland will step up as the one true contender for the title of the best people ever. Let's see what happens next time.